I try to always maintain sort of a healthy skepticism of buzz, in quotes. And I love that my job involves connecting those artists and their work with an audience, a living, breathing audience of human beings in seats in a theater encountering these films.
Maddie Whittle is the assistant programmer for film at Lincoln Center and co-programmer of New York Film Festival talks. Her writing has appeared in Film Comment and other esteemed publications. She is one of few remaining reasons to go on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it. I really enjoy her perspectives on film. Perhaps we can lure her over to Substack. We will see. But in any case, Maddie, welcome to Underexposed.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's great to be here.
Were there other things that you explored along the way, like filmmaking, or was it always about film studies and film analysis and curation and programming for you?
When I was young, I took music lessons and art lessons and was very, I volunteered at art museums and I've always loved sort of the arts with a capital A. And briefly, when I was a teenager, I was interested in design and heard about this job called production designer that, created sets and sort of built environments for films. And, seeing the little sizzle reels of nominated production designers at the Oscars really sort of piqued my interest. And so I thought maybe that would be an avenue to pursue, sort of in terms of contributing creatively to the making of films. But then I got to college and I uh, uh, took some architecture classes, considered majoring in architecture, considered sort of taking that route into a craft field. But that very quickly I determined was not the route for me. And similarly, once I entered the film studies major, there were certain requirements to take certain kinds of production credits towards the major. But I just didn't feel that I had sort of the spark of inspiration, like compelling me to express myself that way. And what I found much more exciting and much more sort of just like intellectually invigorating was to learn about film and film history and film theory and how to watch a film analytically and critically and how to write about film and how to talk about film intelligently. And those were the kinds of sort of intellectual exercises that I was the most drawn to and the most just sort of excited about. And so it became clear to me at a certain point in my film studies education specifically that it was uh, film studies as opposed to film production that really captured my interest. And that has been the case ever since. I'm very fortunate in my work as a programmer to have a lot of contact with artists and develop relationships with filmmakers who we host at Film at Lincoln Center and at our festivals. And so a huge part of the job is working with artists and talking to artists about their work. And I love that. And I love that my job involves connecting those artists and their work with an audience, a living, breathing audience of human beings in seats in a theater encountering these films.
Well, as a filmmaker myself, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about festival programming and curation, maybe an unhealthy amount, puzzling over it because it's a bit of a black box for us. And I know it's different for every single person, but I wonder for you, do you have an approach or guiding principles that guide you through the process of film curation or programming?
The criteria that I'm using are sort of the frameworks through which I'm thinking about film varies by context. It varies from year to year. It varies in relation to my own sort of personal sensibility and preoccupations and sort of thematic interests. But the guiding principle that I follow in my work as a programmer is simply to find films that I connect with and or that I can imagine an audience who would connect with and who would take away something of value from encountering this film.
How has this job expanded your palette or changed your palette? And thinking about it from the perspective of an audience, has that changed you in surprising ways from where you were when you kind of entered this field?
I would say I've quite simply been exposed to just entirely, just a much vaster scale of cinematic art than I had encountered coming into the job. I had trained in film studies, had a degree in film studies, had worked as a research assistant. So I'd been fairly well immersed in the subject matter, but I think working in programming and being exposed to the tastes of different programmers, and you're going to film festivals and thinking through or trying to sort of imaginatively reverse engineer, okay, who was the person behind this program? What sort of coherent personality put this program together, and what can I learn from the way that they've curated their lineup and the films that they've placed in conversation? And so I've just sort of, I think I've amassed a sort of a new knowledge base of different ways of thinking about films, not in isolation, but in conversation with each other.
What recent film or filmmaker are you especially excited about that maybe you've championed, or maybe you've just become aware of their work?
Let's see. Well, one of my favorite parts of my job currently is working on the selection committee for New Directors, New Films, which is a program that Film at Lincoln Center and MoMA co-present. It's for 60 some years now, I believe. This collaboration has been an annual thing, and the focus of this festival, as you might imagine from the name, is on identifying the strongest emerging filmmakers who are maybe on their first or second feature, who audiences may not be familiar with, may never have heard their names, but that we, identify as names to watch, the names that we hope will become household names because they're bringing something so new and exciting and confident to the table. And so one example from this year's lineup was this young guy named Joel Vargas, a New York-based filmmaker whose feature debut was called Mad Bills to Pay. So just a really incredibly assured vision, I think, that he's bringing to the screen in terms of sort of this super naturalistic, but also really precise and carefully executed kind of lyricism. There's a really poetic quality to both his images and even his sense of humor, I would say, is kind of poetic in the way that he teases out surprising little sort of micro ironies in human interactions.
As the film world changes and everybody gets more access to all these films from all over the world on all these streaming platforms and everything, you could make a case that film curation is more important than ever and could adapt in some kind of interesting ways to suit the new environment. Have you thought anything about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, again, a really big question that I think is kind of on the backs of all of our minds as programmers, this sense that in today's economy, in today's media ecosystem, there's such a glut of material. I kind of hate the word content, but I like material. There's audiovisual material out the wazoo that is sort of being served up to us every day. And curation is, I think one of the best tools we have for as individual consumers of these, of entertainment, of art, um, who, most of the film lovers out there don't have the luxury of spending their working hours thinking about films and researching films. And so they benefit from having trusted sources of insight and criticism and analysis that they can turn to and say, tell me what to see. Tell me what's worth my time to seek out and watch, my precious free time that I'm spending watching a film or watching a TV show. And criticism also plays this function, of course. And I think there's a lot of overlap between programming, curating, and criticism. But specifically in terms of programming and curating, I think, there's this sort of divide right now between the virtual and the physical, where there's curating for virtual spaces, for streaming services, for, 5 things to watch now on Netflix. And then there's the type of curating that I do, which is literally programming the films that will go on screen in a physical space, which is much more locally focused. Obviously our main focus is bringing people physically into our physical spaces. And that involves sort of a different calculus than I think the sort of streaming focused curation would, because obviously there is sort of the physical component in the sense that, are there film prints? Are there, filmmakers who can attend in person and sort of enhance the programmatic value of a particular screening of an event? So there's lots of sort of practical considerations that come with the in-person element. But then there's also just sort of thinking about, okay, well, what would be worth it for an individual ticket buyer? What would make it worth it for them to leave their apartment, take the subway into Manhattan, purchase a ticket, and sort of give that extra investment of time and money. And so we're sort of always thinking about what we're doing as being in conversation with and having an awareness of what's available for people to watch at home.
And you mentioned the buzz. I wonder, I mean, it must be really challenging to decipher the signal from the noise and understand what's genuine and what's kind of performative in terms of what people want to watch. And I just wonder if that is a challenge that you face.
Yeah, I mean, I think I try to always maintain sort of a healthy skepticism of buzz, and for me as a programmer, I think it's my sort of responsibility to pay attention to all of these things being said and being, all of these reactions, but also to reserve judgment until I have the opportunity to actually have my own encounter with the film. And then from there, I can sort of reprocess all of this discourse through the lens of my own reaction, and then project into the future and imagine, okay, how do I synthesize what I know to have been this sort of bottled up reaction coming out of this very insular context of this festival, my own reaction, which is insular in a different way because it's specific to me and my experience and my sensibility, and then trying to use what I know from past experience of uh, uh, the audience that I'm envisioning specific to my venue, to my organization, to my city, and just try to project a forecast essentially of like what this film will mean to this audience that hasn't encountered it yet.